learned a lot about competition from a guy named Jeffrey Bodine. Jeffrey is one of NASCAR's top 50 drivers of all time. Jeffrey was driving back in the 80s with Dale Earnhardt Sr. And in fact, there's a movie that's loosely based on what the two of them were doing together, Days of Thunder, if you've ever seen it with Tom Cruise. And what they did was they came down and they interviewed Jeffrey Bodine and Dale Earnhardt Sr., a lot of the other drivers, and then pieced together this movie that was loosely based on their relationship, because at the time what was happening was these two guys kept crashing into one another. They were two of the fastest drivers around. They kept crashing into one another, and the NASCAR officials didn't like it. Now, the fans loved it, and the racetrack owners loved it, but at one point, quickly they tell kind of a story about how Hollywood changes things. Jeffrey said that there was this one crash. He said Dale Earnhardt Sr. had crashed him so that he couldn't finish the race, and Dale couldn't either. But they got that crazy with each other just to try to mess each other up. So he said, at this point, he said the NASCAR official comes over to him. They call both of them in. They throw down a set of keys. And they said, okay, guys, I don't know what's gotten into both of you, but you guys, we're going to go to a restaurant together. You guys are going to drive in the car behind us. You're going to talk about whatever it is. Get it out of your system, because we're going to go to this restaurant and have a really nice time, okay? And everybody's going to be really fine, or else neither one of you two is racing next week. Are we clear? And I said, okay, we're clear. Got it. So he said, the way Jeffrey told it, he said he's got the steering wheel and Dale's in the passenger seat. They're driving behind the NASCAR officials. And he said, Dale says to him, why don't we just bump them? And he said, are you kidding, man? We're already in enough trouble. He said, no, it'll be really funny if we just kind of like tap them, you know? It'd be kind of, he said, I'm not going to tap them. I'm not going to bump them. We're not going to do that. He said, so we got to the restaurant and everything was fine. He said, well, he told that story, and if you see the movie Days of Thunder, the same setup occurs, except they throw down two sets of keys. They tell these guys to drive to the restaurant separately, and on the way to the restaurant, they crash into each other, and they're late, and they're all banged up. So that's what Hollywood does to a story. Well, I've never interviewed anybody who said, would you like to see my accident? And I said, okay, because he said, I got it on video. So, I mean, I know I've been in accidents. I know a lot of people have been in different kind of accidents, but I never met anybody who had it on video. If you Google Jeffrey Bodine, what will come up is Jeffrey Bodine's accident. This is one of the most watched videos on YouTube. This is amazing. This is a shot from that video.
Watch and listen. Look how high he got. I've been around this sport since 1960.
Even in slow motion, you can't tell. Jeffrey's driving just shy of 200 miles an hour. At this point, the top is seared off. Right after this, the engine has flown out. The top right after this gets seared off. Jeffrey is still inside of this. They can't see a number on it. At this point, you hear officials saying, oh my God, it's Jeffrey. And Jeffrey said at that point, he said he started to go through a tunnel, and he said he saw his dad on the other side, his dad who had passed away years later. He said, and then his dad held out his hand, and he said, no, no, Jeffrey, not yet. And he said, then I heard the ambulances, and I heard people around me going, oh my God, it's Jeffrey, and they took him out. And I said, holy mackerel. And then he said, I know that really wasn't my dad there. And he said, oh, really? He said, no, that was actually God. And I said, oh. And he said, God has a way of appearing to us at a time when we need him most with a message we'll hear from a source we'll understand. 2 months after that accident, Jeffrey Bodine was behind the wheel driving again at 200 miles an hour. He said, at that point, he said, I couldn't do it now, but back then I was able to fake the medical doctors at NASCAR. He said, but if I shook my head left or right or up and down, things got really blurry. Now, I don't know if any of you have ever been in those simulators, but it's all about your peripheral vision when things are flying back at you 180, 190 miles an hour. I said, Jeffrey, what do you have going on with death? And he said, it's not about death. He said, I'm just competitive. I said, Jeffrey, I've met chess players who are competitive, for crying out loud. You got something else going on here. What is it? And he paused, and Jeffrey's a very reflective and a very honest guy, and he gave a definition of competitiveness that I thought was pretty interesting. He said, I was afraid of being replaced.